Okay, guys, today we're going to be watching why Putin is so hard to overthrow by Scratch Parties. Go make sure to subscribe to them. This was over a year ago, so maybe things have changed. Let's get straight into it.
On June 24th, 2023, this man was all over the news. Yevgeny Prigozhin was the leader of a private militia that's been fighting alongside the Russian military.
But what happened to the Wagner, or however you say them? Whatever happened to them? I know they marched on, or they tried to overthrow the Russian government. I wonder what happened. Are they still fighting?
In Ukraine. The problem, however, on June 24 was that he was going the wrong way. That morning, his troops stormed Russian military headquarters in the Russian city of Rostov-on-Don.
Armored vehicles and military helicopters in Russia's Rostov region.
By that afternoon, he was leading his troops toward the Russian capital, Moscow.
Wagner vehicles that are heading towards Moscow.
And along the way, he explained why.
Нас 25 000, и мы идем
marching to find out
почему в стране
there are
творится
lawlessness in the
беспредел.
country.
Все, кто хочет,
Those who want to join us, we have to put a stop to
Prigozhin
this
was
nonsense.
suddenly the most serious threat Russian President Vladimir Putin had ever faced. The real surprise, though, was where he came from.
This was a threat coming from inside the house. This was someone close to him who he had trusted, was really seen as a political ally.
For more than 20 years, Putin has constructed a seemingly impenetrable...
I love these hats. These hats. I don't know. The hats. The red and black and gold. I don't know. There's just something about it. I just love the hats.
20 years, Putin has constructed a seemingly impenetrable wall of secret police, intelligence agencies, and military groups around himself, and used it to eliminate anyone who challenged his power. That is, until one of them threatened to bring it all down. So who are the ones that keep Putin in power, and why did one of them rebel?
Okay, so we're gonna be learning about Putin's inner circle.
Its products are riots, terror, and mass murder. Its tools are lies, deceit, blackmail, sabotage, war, and revolution. Its single goal is conquest. It is the KGB.
The Committee for State Security.
Yeah, because Putin was a KGB officer, right? Or an ex-KGB officer.
Was the Soviet Union's notorious intelligence.
These letters aren't adding up. And maybe it's different in Russia.
And it's where this whole story begins. The KGB consisted of hundreds of thousands of agents whose mission was to spy both in foreign countries and inside the Soviet Union. It monitored Soviet dissidents, media organizations, and even members of the ruling Communist Party, all in service of one main goal: keeping the top leaders of the Soviet Union in power. The KGB even spied on the military.
Doesn't the CIA do something like, what's it called? Closer to this, right?
The other major force keeping these leaders in power.
Yeah, it's always the military that keeps dictators in power. That's why they're so invested in the military.
By pitting the KGB against the military, the Soviet leaders maintained a firm grip on power for decades, until one day, they collapsed.
The Soviet Union is dying. The trappings of totalitarianism in Russia are falling away. It was the Communist Party itself, the backbone of the Soviet state.
When the Soviet Union fell, so did the KGB, and the new Russian president, Boris Yeltsin, broke it up into several smaller agencies with distinct responsibilities. The Federal Counterintelligence Service was to prevent threats within Russia. The Foreign Intelligence Service was in charge of spying in other countries. The Federal Protective Service was to protect the president. And others were responsible for things like border control, electronic eavesdropping, and even Russia's many secret underground bunkers. These are Russia's security services. In the 1990s, they were dysfunctional and weak, while around them new factions were on the rise. Rival politicians and a new class of ultra-wealthy businessmen called oligarchs were battling for power under a weakening Yeltsin. In the midst of all of this, a young Vladimir Putin had risen to the right place.
It's great. He kind of looks like Nicolas Cage, doesn't he? Like when he's young.
At the right time. Hey everybody, welcome back to Search Party. Today's video is sponsored by a company
it's an ad.
In minds. Better think of it. Thanks again. In the 1980s, Putin was a KGB officer in East Germany. Then in the 90s, he went from a mid-level bureaucrat to the head of the FSK, since renamed the FSB. Then to the head of Russia's Security Council, where he coordinated with all of Russia's security services. Next, he became Yeltsin's prime minister. Then when Yeltsin suddenly resigned, he chose the 47-year-old Putin to succeed him.
Обращаю внимание на то,
Actually, there
что
will no be vacuum
ни
of
минуты
power, not for a minute.
не будет вакуума власти в стране.
Putin immediately set out to consolidate power, and he started
Loki, he has a nice
Не будет
voice.
вакуума власти в стране.
Putin immediately set out to consolidate power, and he started by calling on the only people he knew and believed he could trust. The FSB was the security service that most resembled the old KGB. It even worked out of its old building. Quickly after becoming president, Putin pulled the FSB directly under his command, then expanded many of its responsibilities, and had it absorb other security services. He then directed it to arrest
Okay, so Putin wasn't in the KGB, he was in the FSB.
oligarchs that didn't pledge loyalty to him and investigate rival politicians. The FSB also trumped up fake charges against countless human rights activists, journalists, and dissidents. This is how Putin captured so much power in the early 2000s. He then elevated the other security services to create a new layer in the Russian state, alongside the military and the sprawling Interior Ministry, the MVD. Putin was pulling Russia's thousands of spies, police officers, and soldiers onto his side. And like bricks in a wall, they blocked anyone from rising up against him.
You have a leader in Putin who really grew up with that KGB background and has a sense of how to use these security services to his own ends.
Yeah,
This
he
is
worked in
Katrina
the
Doxey,
system.
an expert at the Center for Strategic and International Studies.
They purposefully operate in the shadows.
Members and former members of these services were known as the Siliviki, and Putin elevated several of them into his inner circle, along with some trusted politicians and military leaders. This was a collection of close confidants who Putin gave power and wealth to in exchange for their total subordination and loyalty. The most influential members of the inner circle were the Siliviki who worked with Putin before he was president, like the head of the Security Council, Nikolai Patrushev, who worked with Putin in the KGB back in the 70s, same as the head of the FSB, Alexander Bortnikov, and the head of the SVR, Sergei Naryshkin, worked with Putin in the 1990s. Since they owed their
Oh, is
position
that how you say it? Oh,
Sergei Naryshkin
Sergey. I thought Sergey. Oh,
Worked with-
I have a friend named Sergey.
Putin in the
I thought it was
1990s.
Sergey.
Since they owed their positions to Putin, they helped keep this wall of security services and military firmly on Putin's side.
Have you ever
Oh
heard
my
content
God.
creators say, comment the word burgers below and I'll send you over something for free? And then when you comment the
No.
word burgers, you instantly receive a DM automatically within just a few seconds?
No, I've
As he
never.
continued to eliminate challengers well into
Weird
the
ass
2010s.
ad.
The Russian leader doesn't even try to be subtle anymore. Opposition leader Boris Nemtsov is murdered steps from Red Square.
Alexei Navalny, who survived poisoning from a nerve agent that CNN helped trace back to Russian intelligence and the FSB. Navalny is now in solitary confinement in one of Russia's most brutal penal colonies.
With all his challengers defeated, the only factions left that could hypothetically threaten his power were in this wall. So Putin has developed some tactics to coup-proof it.
Putin and various Russian leaders before him
Is he gonna
have
use?
always harbored this fear of the threat from within.
First, Putin gives the security services overlapping responsibilities. For example, the SVR, FSB, and military all have formed units in charge of spying in other countries. And Putin has created a new service in charge of protecting himself, a responsibility long held by the FSO and MVD. He's forcing the services to compete against each other for his favor. Putin also has them spy on each other. Just like under the Soviet Union, the FSB has many agents inside the military. And FSB agents are often arrested by other FSB agents.
Oh, damn.
Finally, Putin frequently purges personnel in these
So his own party, his own factions are killing each other or like working against each other.
services.
I don't want to say kill.
If someone seems too ambitious, they're replaced with someone less threatening and more loyal. Not even the
So they're doing loyalty over skill right now.
members of his inner circle are safe from these purges. Putin's tactics have purposely turned the services and those in the inner circle into bitter rivals.
Yeah, so you're just locked into into that position for life, right? Because if you try and someone who's like more. What was that? more content.
So that if one of them rises up against him, the others will keep it in check. So it was no surprise when Putin allowed a new group to form. Wagner is a militia that emerged around 2014.
Wagner.
Although it was technically illegal under Russian law, it quickly became one of Putin's most useful tools for achieving goals abroad. Wagner helped the Russian military invade.
No, you said Wagner.
Emerged around 2014, allowed a new group to form. Wagner is a militia that emerged around 2014. Although it was technically illegal under Russian law, it quickly became one of Putin's most useful tools for achieving goals abroad. Wagner helped the Russian military invade Ukraine in 2014,
am I going insane?
and helped it fight in Syria beginning in 2015. Wagner also operated in several more countries that Russia had an interest in. The person in charge of Wagner was named Yevgeny Prigozhin. He was an entrepreneur who built several companies, including one that catered meals for the Kremlin, where he caught Putin's eye.
Prigozhin, in his young adulthood, was a criminal, and he did eventually build up this business empire using this sort of gang mafia style politics. That sort of background and appetite to take on violence, to do whatever it takes to succeed, that really made him stand out to Putin.
So Putin had Prigozhin's Wagner work alongside the Russian military, and for years they seemed to work well together. But that would change when Putin made the biggest mistake of his reign.
Vladimir Putin ordering an all-out air and ground assault on its neighbor.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine hasn't gone well. The Russian military first failed to capture the capital, Kyiv, and within a few months only controlled parts of the east and
What do you mean hasn't gone? Aren't they
south of Ukraine?
like
For Putin, these failures
really,
pose a
like,
huge risk
not really well, but like decent
to his power, by possibly lowering his inner circle's confidence in his ability, and increasing the risk that one of them might try and overthrow him. So Putin has doubled down on his playbook.
I don't want to make them like war hero.
He had FSB leaders arrested for providing bad intelligence in the lead up to the invasion.
I wonder. I don't
He fired
know.
more than 100 guard.
Oopsie. How is Ukraine doing in the war? I think that Ukraine's losing slightly. That's what I'm saying.
Including its second in command, and fired several military generals. For Prigozhin, though, this was good news.
He saw this opportunity for Wagner to be presented as the competent ones.
Первый грех – это дезертирство. Никто не дает заднюю. Никто не отступает. Никто не сдается в плен.
Prigozhin
Hey, what is this video quality, bro?
swelled Wagner's ranks by recruiting men from Russia's prisons, then pushed them to the front of key battles
From the prisons. Oh, so those
in
are
Ukraine.
didn't Germany in World War II have something like that?
Most notably
Because they would like hire inmates to like go fight the Allies.
in the town of Bakhmut. There,
Isn't that kind of common?
Wagner is reported to have used brutal tactics and suffered tens of thousands of killed and wounded. But on May 20th,
What's the point? What's the point? What's the point of having a webcam or a body cam if you're just not going to show anything, bro?
tactics and suffered tens of thousands of killed and wounded. But on May 20th, 2023, they captured it. Wagner's success led it to overlap more with the Russian military, while also elevating Prigozhin into Putin's inner circle, where he began to publicly criticize the military leaders.
I think we have taken Bakhmut before the new year. If it wasn't for our terrible military bureaucracy, Shogun and Gersomov have a choke on their own spit.
Prigozhin has come out publicly saying things that no one else could get away with saying in Russia.
But
Because
Putin
he's
didn't
the
step
top
in to stop
guy right
Prigozhin
now.
because the feud benefited him.
He could play the two sides off of one another, thus using each of them to limit the other. And in a way, can disperse some of that pressure from landing on him.
So Putin allowed the feud to escalate.
Шойгу! Герасимов! Где боеприпасы? Вы сидите в дорогих клубах.
Finally, in June 2023, Putin's military leaders struck back by announcing they would absorb Wagner's troops, essentially cutting off Prigozhin from the thing that gave him wealth and access to Putin. So on June 23, 2023, in order to survive, Prigozhin rebelled.
Who's that guy? Who's that guy?
Prigozhin rebelled.
That guy flipping up? No, he's not. I thought he was like flipping off the tank. I was like, bro, what are you doing?
Moscow, Prigozhin claimed he was planning to remove just Russia's military leaders. But Putin was forced to go on national television and call Prigozhin a traitor. For the first time, the world could see that Putin didn't have total control. And it was because the feuds he stoked between his subordinates were backfiring on him.
This was someone close to him who he had trusted, that he had given a surprisingly long leash to. That shock factor was really part of what gave this such a large impact.
The people recording this.
What gave this such a large impact?
The person recording this and like the dude, everyone here is gonna go missing in like after a month. This was posted. You can tell. They all
Just
went
before
missing
reaching
a month
Moscow,
later.
Prigozhin agreed to surrender, but his rebellion revealed a much bigger problem for Putin. His wall of security services did not appear to try and stop Wagner's mutiny, and many of Putin's top military and security service leaders were nowhere to be seen.
We did have evidence that some of the intelligence services were aware that Prigozhin was planning something, but what's unclear is why actions weren't taken to really stop. Of
course they're not gonna help you, bro.
This wall has for years successfully defended him from outside challengers.
This is an inside
totally willing
challenger,
to
not
stop him from
outside.
coming from
That's
the
a
inside.
fact.
It's a sign that Putin's grip on power could be weaker than ever before. Equally suspicious is that Putin hasn't purged the security services for their inaction, and he's reportedly met with Prigozhin and Wagner repeatedly since their mutiny. That means for the time being,
I know their leader is not alive anymore, so...
War in Ukraine will continue to put pressure on Putin's leadership, but his wall of protection remains unchanged, cracks and all. Hey everybody, that's up.
That's the end of this video for today. Make sure you go like, subscribe, and comment, and share with your friends. See you guys on the next one. Bye-bye.